So if you've ever wondered why you might have exhaustion, brain fog, chronic pain, even years after something happened, whether it was something traumatic or something that was seemed to be medical, but doctors still haven't been able to figure out. Maybe you've been seeing doctors, they can't figure it out. You've been in therapy, they can't figure it out. And it seems to be not just a psychological story. The latest neuroscience and immune biology research shows that trauma fundamentally rewires the immune system and the brain-body connection in ways that keep you stuck well beyond the memory of what happened. So approaching it just from the psychological side or just from the physical side is not going to work. We have to look at it from both sides. I'm Jenna. I'm a clinical and molecular neuroscientist and a licensed therapist, and I study the way the brain and the body communicate through stress and immune signals and how those conversations dictate your physical and mental health. So follow along if you want to learn more about the science behind all of that and how to really rewire your body and your brain and your life from the inside out, from the cellular level all the way up to your daily behaviors. So this week we're looking at a 2022 study, a review article by Katrinley et al. That shows the role of the immune system, or discusses the role of the immune system in PTSD. And so let's just dive right in. And also, if you want to learn more about this, do a deep dive with me. I have a course called Will I Ever Be Good Enough? I've linked it below. I've made sure that it's affordable for people so that more people can access it. And it talks about both the psychology and the neuroscience behind complex trauma, early developmental trauma, and what to do about it. So it's a very extensive course. It builds upon my super viral 2-hour workshop that I did a couple years ago called Will I Ever Be Good Enough? And so I just expanded that course out for you guys because it was so popular and I felt like I needed to add in all the other things, and especially in terms of what to do about it. So that's below. And then if you want, every week I do this neuroscience, this intro to a paper that we're talking about that week. And then I do a deep dive that's available for paid subscribers on my Substack. So if you want the deep dive, I go into more of what to do about these things, more of the science, a deeper understanding beyond just this intro. And again, it's available for paid Substack subscribers. To become a paid Substack subscriber, it's like the cost of 2 coffees a month. And you get 2 to 5 minute practices every single week as well. It will help you start to rewire your nervous system. So between my Substack and my course, you can get a lot of understanding around what to do about all of this, because the complex trauma brain, the CPTSD brain, is completely different from other psychological issues and even from PTSD. There are distinct differences between the PTSD brain and the complex PTSD brain. So a lot of people with complex trauma try to get help for things that may work for PTSD or other issues. It doesn't work for them because their brain is wired differently because of that trauma. So that's what my channel focuses on. And trauma or not, I think everything that I'm teaching is also applicable to anybody looking to just live a healthier life and a more fulfilling life, because the more connected you are to yourself, which is what I teach, the better you're going to feel, the better your physical and your mental health will be. And then from there, your brain starts to function better, literally. And the world really opens up for you when you're deeply embodied. So when you're exposed to trauma, especially in early childhood or in childhood in general, this will happen in a toxic family, with a narcissistic or emotional parent. So any kind of trauma that's dominated, if that is going through trauma, your body starts producing inflammatory molecules. These molecules typically in the context of trauma are C-reactive protein or CRP, and then inflammatory cytokines like interleukin-6 or interleukin-12, interleukin-1. So we call those IL-6, 1. There's a bunch of them that we won't get into, but IL-6 and then TNF-alpha or tumor necrosis factor alpha. These are very common in trauma presentations. And they're not only found in the blood, but they're found in the urine, saliva, and cerebrospinal fluid. So when we have it happening in the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, spinal column, that's our central nervous system. And then the peripheral nervous system is the rest of the body, the way that the nerve fibers go out into the rest of the body. That's our peripheral nervous system, and the periphery of the brain, essentially. It's the extension of the brain into the body. And so when we're looking at various changes or alterations at the molecular level, when someone's been through trauma, we're looking at it both peripherally, in the way that we measure that is typically through urine or blood or saliva, and then centrally would be through cerebrospinal fluid. They're not just found in the blood, but they're also found in that fluid that's running through the brain and the brainstem. So these immune shifts are measurables. People reporting complex trauma or complex PTSD, and if they have a history of ongoing childhood adversity, they typically will have, they're much more likely to have, statistically speaking, symptoms like chronic exhaustion, chronic pain, autoimmune disorders, migraines and sensitivity to light or sound, digestive issues, feeling sick and run down more often, and a whole host of other issues that you'll see much more frequently in people with a trauma history, because we have massive amounts of data that shows that childhood trauma is a major contributing factor, almost a causal, we could almost pretty confidently say causal factor for a number of physical and mental health disorders in adulthood. And they've seen this across cultures, across races. It doesn't matter. It's a nervous system is a nervous system is a nervous system in that way, in terms of childhood trauma predisposes us to a lot of the same things. Science confirms that if you're experiencing these things, you're not imagining it. It's not fake. I don't even like the term psychosomatic, because it completely invalidates that there's absolutely a physiological component to this, or if there's not a physiological component, there's an attentional component in terms of where the person's attention tends to go. You might see this in something like functional neurological disorder, where they're having seizures, but they don't have seizure disorder in the brain. And a lot of these people usually they're women with a trauma history, not always, but women with a trauma history, and they often are very invalidated or thought to be exaggerating or making it up. And it's not true. And so we have to look at these pieces in terms of what is childhood trauma predisposing us to. That's different even from just adult onset trauma. Inflammation matters. Inflammation really matters. A 2025 meta-analysis shows that PTSD increases the risk for autoimmune disorders such as lupus, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, even after therapy helps to some degree with symptom management. Again, people will typically be sent to cognitive behavioral therapy for these kinds of things to basically adjust their thinking and their attitude and their thoughts about it, which is fine in terms of short-term support, but that's not getting to the root of why people are even having these issues, right? It's not getting to the root of the chronic inflammation that is typically associated with these conditions. So this immune activation is not just a footnote in these cases. It's driving the fatigue, it's driving the frequent illness, it's driving poor wound healing, or the propensity to be able to break your bones more easily. If you have childhood trauma, you have a higher propensity for liver disease, heart disease, under-earning financially. Like, all of it's connected, and it's all coming from a multi-layered issue in the system, both at the psychological level, but also with cortisol running through the body and the blood. And this study is a great introduction. I wouldn't say it's an introduction, because it's very pointedly nuanced in terms of psychoneuroimmunology, which is my specialty and what my degree is in which is the way that the immune system, the psychology, and the nervous system or the brain and the body are working together, and how that all gets altered molecularly at the molecular level in various disorders. Chronic inflammation is also linked to impaired sleep, worsened cognitive symptoms. When you have inflammation in the body, it tends to also be showing up in the brain. It makes things harder to focus, makes it harder to manage stress, and it makes it hard to just be productive in daily life. So if these things go unaddressed, you're going to struggle in life in general. And you might not even identify with having had childhood trauma. So, it's important to acknowledge that a lot of these things, especially if doctors aren't able to figure it out, we have to look at early adversity and the way that can create a whole cascade of inflammation. People in trauma support forums, and what I hear frequently from my clients, consistently report feeling stuck as well, unable to break through cycles of low energy, low motivation. And we have to look again at the nervous system and the body at the molecular level to understand why that might be happening. we have this brain-body circuit, and because of that, processing it, or just talking about it is typically not enough for these folks. Neuroscience shows that stress biology works through brain regions like the insular cortex that receives input from about sensation in the body, and the anterior cingulate cortex. They are responsible, especially in conjunction, for monitoring interoceptive body signals. Again, interoception meaning the ability to track sensation in the body and then be able to verbalize that in a coherent, organized way. And so when the anterior cingulate cortex and the insular cortex are working together, and there's other brain regions that are connected here, but they're going to be helping to manage and track heartbeat, breath, pain, the status of the visceral organs, the status of your bones. They're literally pulling data from your bones, from your skin, from your muscles, from your fascia. Literally, they're getting hundreds of thousands of signals every single second coming up from the body to the brain. And most of that's getting filtered out from your cognitive awareness. When inflammation is high, when inflammation in the body and the brain are high, these brain regions can tend to amplify or turn the volume up on threat signals where the person might feel that they're under threat, or leading to maybe they're emotionally overwhelmed, or they're scared or stressed, and they might shut down and freeze. And these inflammatory processes all create this issue where then you're not going to be able to regulate yourself as well. You're not going to be able to manage stress as well. Cortisol and inflammation go hand in hand as well in terms of these processes. So that's why symptoms can persist even after years of talk therapy, years of coaching, or trying to process trauma memories, if it's not done in the right way that accesses these brain regions. And most of the quote unquote evidence-based treatments, or I would say evidence-based modalities, I wouldn't call them treatments because they're not actually treating or curing any of this. And their long-term prognosis for people is not good, meaning that people tend to quit, especially people with trauma. They go into studies on where they're doing cognitive therapy or EMDR, things that are desensitizing and dissociating people from their trauma. And they either think they feel better, but it's more likely that they're dissociating, so they think they feel better, because a lot of these are measured through self-reports. And there's clear evidence that these cognitive and bilateral stimulation processes and modalities don't actually reduce. There's zero evidence that they reduce inflammatory cytokines or inflammatory biomarkers in the periphery or even in the cerebrospinal fluid. So it's not really creating any alteration in inflammatory biomarkers in the brain or the body. So they're good sort of short term. They can help people cope. I'm not saying don't go do those things. I'm just saying let's also understand that this is not often talked about. Those results don't often get published in research. And I see it really frequently in my clinical practice, because the people that it doesn't work for tend to come to me. I used to, as a wilderness therapist, I was the only somatically oriented wilderness therapist in the entire United States at the time. Anyway, I don't know what it's like now, but when I was the only somatically trained person. And I would get people from all over the US and all over the world who had not been helped by these more traditional trauma modalities. And so I have a unique view into the fact that these things don't help, or they'd help to a minimal degree. And then for folks who have really severe trauma, it can actually make them worse. I've seen people put themselves back into situations after things like EMDR because they were so desensitized to it. They put themselves back into very dangerous situations because they felt that it was fine because it had dissociated them enough that they then went back in and they were traumatized, literally putting themselves back into very dangerous situations. And so I would not say that's their fault. I would say that's a failure on the clinical side where they're not being helped. Even just if you don't have like super severe trauma, that can also be the case too. I get a lot of folks that come to my practice that have not been helped. And it's really because they have childhood trauma that's been unaddressed. And so improvement in these psychological symptoms, again, talk therapy can be really great. EMDR can help for single event traumas. I'm not saying they're bad, but let's just look at them within their scope and not think that they're a cure-all or a be-all, end-all, because they're not, according to the literature. If you really dig into the literature, and most clinicians are not doing that, they're just taking what they're being told from the trainers at these programs, and they're being trained for maybe a weekend, and that's it. So again, I'm here to be super negative. I think it's just we have to address this issue in terms of why people aren't getting better, and then they think it's their fault or there's something wrong with them, and that's not the case. So we have to give credit where credit's due. And be clear about that. Okay. from a neuroscience perspective. Moving right along. Even if you have improvement in these psychological symptoms, it doesn't mean that there's going to be, again, a reduction in these inflammatory markers. These cognitive or more traditional modalities do not reliably lower CRP, IL-6, TNF-alpha, even when there's psychological symptom improvement. And again, I'll deep dive more into this whole list in the deep dive, which again is on my Substack. But number one, you want to look at more of like micro habits for brain and body safety. It's not about, I'm going to go do an hour a week of EMDR. I'm going to desensitize my brain through bilateral stimulation of the brain, and it's just going to be wham, bam, I'm done. That doesn't work that way. We have to train the body through repeated daily protocols that support interoceptive awareness to bring the sensory system back online, because complex PTSD and PTSD are primarily sensory disorders or sensory issues, and we have to rewire those sensory pathways from the bottom up. It doesn't work to think about it more, to read about it more, to even necessarily know about it. Those are a good start, and you do need to understand what's going on, but then we have to start getting into our daily practice, okay? Omega-3s and anti-inflammatory nutrition, hugely beneficial, okay? Supplementing omega-3 fatty acids has been shown time and time again to support a number of different physical and mental health issues. Usually you need to have a really high quality fish oil. I'll put the ones I like below. If you don't buy a high quality one, it's almost worse or just not going to be helpful at all, because they're not going to have been tested for heavy metals. A lot of them can have heavy metals in them, and that's just going to make things worse. So please invest in your omega-3s, organic cold pressed olive oils, flaxseed. Again, I'll have to chuckle because I see people eating whole flax seeds that aren't ground. But the flaxseed needs to be ground up. Your body's not going to process any of it. It's just going to pass right through you. The flax seeds just on their own. It does need to be ground. Keep it in the fridge so it doesn't go rancid. Things like that. Walnuts are a great source of omega-3s. And they've all been shown, omega-3s in general, have been shown to decrease inflammatory markers transdiagnostically, which means across a number of different mental and physical health disorders. And they improve cognitive function after trauma and after even a traumatic brain injury. I would highly consider a Mediterranean-style diet rich in plants and antioxidants for sure. Okay. Again, I'm not your doctor, but that's what the literature shows, is typically a Mediterranean-style diet is excellent for these things. And then in terms of anti-inflammatory nutrition, looking at things like polyphenols and high antioxidant load, you're going to want to look at things like dark chocolate, but without a bunch of additives. I tend to go for an organic one, a fair trade one, and then also without a bunch of dairy in it as well. Casein and dairy inhibits the absorption of antioxidants. Just be aware that if you're having a bunch of dairy with these things, it's not necessarily going to be very helpful. Blueberries, berries, spinach, there's tons of ways to get a higher antioxidant load. Spices, really helpful in terms of anti-inflammatory nutrition. Yeah, lots of ways to do that. Also green tea every day, hugely beneficial, tons of research on that. Mindfulness-based practices, meta-analyses across the board show that regular mindfulness and breath-based practices, I would say it depends on the breath work. They can lower CRP levels and IL-6 levels, helping reset that stress immunity loop. And consistent breath work or guided body scans, which I highly recommend. I find that breath work, depending on the breath work, it's not always safe for trauma survivors, and people can go into really intense breath work sessions, and it can be contraindicated from what I've seen in terms of it sending in people into dissociation and things like that. Guided body scans really useful typically, and they can create measurable changes over weeks. And then somatic tracking and interoceptive training. This is what my expertise is in, and also taught yoga full-time for a living in San Francisco when I was there for my first graduate degree. And so I do have an expertise there as well. And so I teach trauma-informed yoga, trauma-informed mindfulness, and trauma-informed somatic and interoceptive training in my course. Again, Will I Ever Be Good Enough? That's linked below. And when you sign up for that, you have the option to also enroll in my membership, which is the best place to ask me questions, to practice these things live, to have live calls with me every single week. I'm actually going to be increasing the number of calls to 4 days a week. So you can literally come onto a call 4 days a week. Plus there's hundreds of pre-recorded calls in the membership and pre-recorded practices, interoceptive training, everything that I'm talking about. We talk about food. We do cook-alongs. It's really fun. And I love being in there and with you all. So that's a great place as well to learn and really implement. The membership is really the place where you can learn to implement these things. And then a couple times a year, depending on the year and what's going on for me, I offer 12-week groups and long-term groups that teach people really deep interoceptive awareness that's life-changing. And I've had so many people say that those groups have been more effective than 10 to 15 years of talk therapy that they've all had before. You want to learn to train your brain to listen to your body. So much of your interoceptive signaling is getting filtered out depending on the way that your brain is working or the way that your brain got used to focusing on things. And we want to start to expand your brain's ability to hear your body. That's vitally important. So somatic work, a gentle trauma-informed yoga. Again, not all yoga is trauma-informed at all. Guided body awareness, and all enhance your nervous system's ability to regulate emotion as well. And especially those who are feeling stuck after lots of talk therapy or lots of just more cognitive approaches, things like that. So your symptoms are not just in your mind or just in your past. They're literally living in your body still. They are written into your biology right now in this moment. And every science-backed micro habit, nutritional shift, mindfulness practice reshapes not only your nervous system, but also your inflammation profile. And we have the research to back this up. So that's the neuroscience of trauma recovery. It's within your reach. You can start that today. It doesn't have to be 3 hours a day of yoga, 4 hours a day of meditation. You don't have to have a 10-hour morning routine. All these things that people tend to say are like, oh, I got to do all these things. No, you need daily, small, micro protocols, micro habits that will start to shift your nervous system. So if you want to, again, deep dive into this topic, that's available on my Substack. I'll link that below. And so if you're a therapist, a clinician, or survivor seeking next level understanding of trauma's impact, then that deep dive is for you as well. In the 2022 paper here that I'm reviewing, fundamentally advances our knowledge of PTSD as a neuroimmune disorder. It's not just a psychiatric diagnosis, okay? So today I'm going to show you how trauma also alters DNA methylation, inflammatory signaling, and neural circuits that shape not only your mental health, but your relationships and your productivity. So I will see you there, and I hope to see you in the membership and my course and all the places that you can learn from me. See you soon.